Today is October the 3rd, 2011. My name is Hersh Libo, and along with Marcy Schoenfeld, our top cinephotographer, we're at the beautiful home of Marion and Irwin Gans, 51 Caprice Drive in Stamford, Connecticut. We're here to do an oral history on behalf of the Jewish Historical Society of Lower Fairfield County. Good afternoon, Marion and Irwin. Good afternoon, Irwin.
Good afternoon, sir.
We're going to have a little talk here on behalf of your history. Tell us, where were you born? And
Born in Portchester, New York, 1926. A lovely little community.
you lived there and grew up there till what age?
Until the war, when I went into the Navy. And
What are your memories of your youth in the
Oh.
schools?
we all have bicycles. We love to ride our bicycles to the model airplane store. Or if in Boy Scouting, we would ride out into the country with the field glasses and look for birds for the birding merit badge or whatever.
So you built model planes,
Model airplanes from day one.
and you were a Boy Scout?
Boy Scout, Eagle, 60 merit badges, most advanced scout in Portchester when I retired from scouting.
And then you graduated from high school there?
High school,
And then service, or
I was in the Navy.
what did you do in the
I
Navy?
was an aerographer, a weatherman, and that was interesting, very interesting. I had to send up the balloon to see what the ceiling was, so that the pilots would know what the ceiling was. I would go on the roof and let up a balloon, fill a balloon with gas, measuring very delicately the ounces of gas so that the balloon would rise at a certain rate, and follow it with a theodolite until it disappeared into the overcast of such, and the pilots would then know what the ceiling was.
Where were you stationed?
San Diego, Florida is where I spent most of my time in a big air station down there.
And then when you came out of the service, what were your years in the service? What years were you in the service?
43, 4,
Five.
yeah, it wasn't a long time because the war ended, and I came back and went back to college.
Where'd you go to school?
Originally, I went uptown NYU because I thought I wanted to be an aeronautical engineer because I built model airplanes all my life. But when I came back, I realized this was not something for me, and I changed.
What was Jewish life in Portchester?
Pardon me?
What was Jewish life like in Portchester while you were
Portchester?
growing up?
It was a small town. Deep in the south end of the town was the old synagogue. Narrow little synagogue, and up in the back was the balcony where the women were. And then there was a Jewish center. So the services were usually mostly in the Jewish center. One time my father would always complain that he couldn't get an aliyah, get an honor, because he wasn't as wealthy as some of the other men. And so sometimes we went to the old synagogue where he was given more respect.
Call it yichus. Yes. At any rate, with that upbringing, did you encounter much anti-Semitism there or in the
Only
Navy?
once did some kid yell at my grandmother, who would walk downtown. but not myself. But once
How about in the Navy?
I don't ever recall.
What business were your parents in?
My father had the Greenwich Coal and Oil Company in Greenwich, a gasoline station, and my mother's family had I. Goldberg and Son, a clothing store, men's clothing and women's shoes and bags and handbags and whatever.
Right. Do you have brothers, sisters?
Yes, my brother is 2 years older than me, Norman, and my sister Eleanor, who's gone now, was a couple of years older than us.
So when you finished at NYU, you were in the service. When you came out, you went back to college?
I went back to NYU and asked to be transferred downtown because I realized you can't flunk physics 3 semesters in a row and be an engineer. And NYU would not allow me to transfer downtown. So I applied to every school in the East, and Syracuse accepted me, gave me credit for the year that I had, and I went to Syracuse.
And met?
She's waving to me over there. Marion, yes. Syracuse was a very lovely environment. I was a skier. There was I didn't have to take gym and run around in shorts. I could go skiing as my physical activity. And what else? I think I tried to teach Marion to ski. She tried.
How did you meet?
How did we meet?
We met on a train
Yes, that's
coming
right.
back from a holiday at home. We
Right.
met on a train out of Grand Central Station.
Right. Syracuse was had a tremendous amount of students from the New York area, Long Island, Connecticut, whatever, New Jersey. And a friend of mine, Marty Ryan, and I were sitting together, and Marion came down the aisle, and she knew Marty, and we. That's how we met.
It's a good thing neither of you missed that particular train. At any rate, you married after you graduated
Yes.
and settled.
Let's see. Yeah, we went to Fairlawn Apartments in Stamford. Lovely. We were very lucky to get an apartment, actually.
How did you happen to come to Stanford? You had been in Portchester?
Well, our company was the Greenwich Oil Company, and I'd say half our business was in Stamford, trickled to Darien, and the other half was Portchester, trickled to Rye, Harrison, whatever.
So you lived in the Fairlawn
So,
Apartments?
Yeah, that was sort of in between, and we liked Fairlawn. Lovely neighbors.
Where was that located? In
Fairlawn?
Stanford, yeah.
On the east side of town, on top of the hill.
On Main Street.
Main
East
Street, surrounded by bushes and I planted tomatoes, and the vines came up, and we told all of the groundsmen, take a tomato anytime you want. All we had to do was raise the window and reach out and take a tomato. They just loved it. The groundsmen, they just loved it.
So you were originally a Jewish farmer in Stanford? At any rate, you're married, children?
Yes, we have 3 lovely children. Our first son, Edward, and our daughter, Julie, and our youngest son,
Robert.
Wonderful children.
When we interview Marion, she'll tell us more about the kids, I'm sure. Well, tell me, what was your involvement besides your work in your field? Your involvement with Jewish affairs.
We had a couples club started, and we went out to meet all Jewish newcomers, and we got the information from,
I believe we got the information from the utility company. In those days, there were no privacy laws, and they would give us the names of people for whom they had just turned on the electric power, and we determined whether they were Jewish or not, or tried to
and we would
determine.
go out and I think, I'm not sure whether we called them first or we
Yes,
called them first, and then we'd go out and visit with them and tell them what the community had to offer. And I think we provided a very nice service for new folks coming in.
Absolutely. And so how large was this group, this Jewish group?
Our young people?
Yeah.
It was a good sized.
I would say at least 30 couples.
Yeah, it was.
It was started at Agudath Shalom, Congregation Agudath Shalom.
Right. So it was, Agudath Shalom was the Orthodox. But we had a young rabbi, Joe Ehrenkrantz. I mean, he was dynamic. Did you know, Joe? Oh. Well, he was very dynamic and a leader, and the congregation grew.
So you
Young
became
people.
more involved in Jewish affairs
Yes.
once you came to Stanford.
With him, in fact, we had our own services downstairs in the synagogue on high holy days and whatever. And upstairs was the older rabbi. I can't remember now.
No, it was just Joe.
Just still Joe. Yeah.
And then you became also involved in politics in Stanford at one time.
Yes, I'm trying to think now. I know it was in someone's house in not too far from where our house
We
was.
used to stuff envelopes and make phone calls in Vivian and Norman Gless's house for a very wonderful mayor of
Yes.
Stanford, Walter Kennedy.
Right, Walter Kennedy. Those were the Camelot days of politics in Stanford. That's
What was living like in Stanford at that time? This must have been in the 60s, early 70s, as compared to now. Is there any big difference in your mind?
well, the community, Stanford blossomed way out in the ridges, Sawmill Road and
Fox Ridge.
Fox Ridge
Hill.
and all of a sudden we had the streets open up way up in the north and beautiful big homes, and I was out there every Saturday because I was trying to get fuel oil accounts, and the builder would say, "Don't buy from that young man." He would be,
Why was that?
because he got a commission from his oil company. So what I did is I gave a commission to my customer. So I did very well.
So in business, what was your position in your firm?
Well, I was a salesperson, and my older brother Norman was the man who was there at 6 in the morning when the drivers came in, the trucks were warmed up, and the packets of tickets were given. And his day ended practically, although he would drive the big trailer to Mount Vernon to the Crown Central Petroleum gasoline bulk plant, because we sold Crown gasoline. And he liked a big trailer truck. My brother, well, he was.
Did your children ever work in the business?
No. No, that was, in fact, I don't even know if we had the business attached, really.
Yes.
But I mean, that they would be of working age. I don't think at working, I retired early, I retired at 50. The reason was simple, we sold the property. And a big office building went up. I mean, we ended up fairly well. The property finally paid off. so to
Where
speak.
was this?
Pardon?
Where in Greenwich was it? Was it in Greenwich?
Down by Bellhaven, next to the Boys Club of Greenwich, on Horseneck Lane.
It's like a short block from the Greenwich Railroad
Yeah.
Station.
Yeah.
Tell me about your leisure activities,
My leisure activities?
painting, your photography, travel.
Trout fisherman. I had a blank and I tied and varnished the rod and tied the trout flies. I enjoyed that very much.
Did you make your own flies?
Oh yeah.
It's quite an art.
It was just building a little model. And I was a model builder, so it just came very quickly to me.
How about your artwork, painting and photography?
Well, I joined a photography club. I was a member for 12 years at least. And every month we had a competition, slides competition. And I had some, you know, the little photograph was about this big, and I had them blown up, and I was selling photography. I had shows in banks or here or there. So
What did you photograph mostly?
my goodness, everything. Everything you can think of. Nature, aviation, when we went to
Excuse me.
the airfields, for the big air shows, whatever, marine.
Do you still do photography?
Not really. Now I do pen drawings.
Of,
What were you going to think, man?
Some of the prizes that you won were photographies of people, like Julie coming out of the pool,
Yeah,
and
Well, we had a competition for 12 years.
on a
and-
different subject each time.
Yeah, and I would enter different slides that I thought were the better ones.
going back to your youth, I think you forgot to tell us about your chicken and egg business.
Well, my father had bought an old mansion on a corner in Portchester. He married my mother, and of course her sister and brother-in-law all worked in I. Goldberg and Son, men's clothing and women's pocketbooks and shoes. And they were well off. So my father bought this big old mansion. And how did he do it? Well, on the top floor he rented it, the apartment, and on the side floor he rented an apartment, and over the garage he rented an apartment. And then even in the basement, in the cook's quarters, he had rented an apartment. That's how he was able to what's the word?
To pay the mortgage.
Afford.
Yeah, to pay the mortgage for this big house. I mean, he was so proud of his own
Entrepreneurship.
right, and because his wife's sister and brother-in-law were very well off in this I. Goldberg and Son thing, and my father was from New Haven, was the out of
He was the outlaw.
yeah, the out of state guy.
Tell about the chickens, Irwin.
Chickens,
Yeah.
yes. My father would have a customer who couldn't pay the bill, and the man offered to give him chickens, and they were show chickens. Can you imagine a chicken with a beautiful head of feathers and colors and whatever, they were gorgeous. So we had in this property that we had, there were two little tiny buildings in the back. What they were originally, I have the slightest idea. So we put fencing, we put chicken wire around, and we put doors high up, and above them we put rods from brooms so that the chickens would roost there at night, and we could scrape the scrapings off, which was tremendous for growing vegetables and stuff. And we sold chicken eggs in the neighborhood. And once we put 3 eggs under a hen, and we put a dozen eggs under a hen, and 3 hatched. We were terribly disappointed, but we went down to the local
Poultry market.
poultry, and bought little, and slipped them under the mother one by one, so she wouldn't know, because she would kill. She would not raise. And so we raised little ones, and sometimes we let them go. The neighbors just got a kick out of it. Here's a hen with 10 little chicks going up the grass.
You have any other memories of your youth besides the bicycle riding, the
Well,
chickens?
Boy Scouting.
Tell us about that.
Oh, Boy Scouting. My father encouraged us. He just loved the idea. If we didn't get 6 merit badges every Court of Honor, we couldn't. We had to get 6 merit badges. And when we came home that night from the Court of Honor, we had to sit there and open the books to try to find the 6 for the next Court of Honor. He loved scouting. And of course, both of us got Eagle. I had 60 merit badges. I was the most advanced scout in Portchester at that time. My brother did very well also.
So going back to your parents, where were they born?
My mother was a Portchester woman, and my father was from New Haven. And I can't remember how they met. I really don't know how they met. But Portchester, but he had the business in Greenwich. And he knew Portchester people, as well as Greenwich and Stanford.
Do you remember how he got into the coal business?
Well, I had another uncle, Ed, in Norwalk, who was in that business. And maybe that's how, he went into it. Because
And his parents, were they born in the States?
no.
Your father's parents, your grandparents?
No,
They came
Russia.
Russia. And
He
your
fought,
mother's,
as I said, he fought the Turks in the Russian army.
and your mother's parents?
Portchester. She was born in Portchester. She was a school teacher.
Her parents,
Her
her
parents,
grandparents.
your grandparents
Yeah.
on your mother's side.
I don't know when they came over.
Did your father ever tell you any experiences that he had in the Russian army?
No, that was my grandfather.
Oh, your grandfather?
Yeah. My grandfather was in the Russian army, and he said how he had to run over his dead friend, and when they,
Fellow soldiers.
it was terrible. I think they fought the Turks. So he had bad memories there, but he was.
Is there anything you could think of that should, is there anything you could think of that you'd like to mention at this particular point?
My father quit school early and sold newspapers to help put his younger brother Lou into dental school. So we were very close with my Uncle Lou, who was a dentist in New Haven, and another brother was in the coal and oil business in Norwalk, and my father opened up in Greenwich. How he got that, I can't remember. How he chose Greenwich that's not an easy town for a Jewish family.
Did you at least get a discount on your dental did you at least get a discount from your uncle, or did he get from his brother for his dental work?
My Uncle Lou was just a sweetheart. We used to play, he would have the silver, you know. And
Compounding.
So,
For the
inlays.
fillings. No,
Fillings.
the fillings.
Yeah, and he would let us push these little tiny silver balls around with the toothpicks because you didn't want to touch the. He was a sweetheart. Uncle Lou was a sweetheart.
Irwin, what about traveling in the trailer?
Wait,
Uh,
go.
When I was a youngster, my father bought the third covered wagon trailer in Chicago from, and we went out west. And of course, he never pulled a trailer before behind a car, but he knew horse and wagon. And so he had no problem in backing it up and you know, and driving it. And we went right out to Yellowstone Park and all through the West. It was fabulous for us. And I was a young kid, I think 6 years old, 7 years, I don't even remember. But my brother and my sister, it slept, there were two double bunks. The couch in the front of the trailer opened up into two bunks, double bunks, and we kids all slept on the folks slept on the top. And it had a little pot-bellied stove on a raised platform inside the door. That was for heat. And I think we used it once. It was one cold night in Yellowstone, I think. We put some coal in it, and
So you were born what year?
1926.
Is there anything that you could think of that you'd like to add to any of this history?
I was very lucky that in my town there was an older young man who was a model builder. And he built a trailer. And we would all put our big gas models with the little gas engines in them in this trailer. And he would take us up to a field at the end of North Street in Greenwich. And we would fly our model airplanes there. And it was fabulous to have this. He was a young man then. His precision models were incredible. They were museum quality, metal models of every kind, and his workmanship on his airplanes were incredible. And I was so lucky to be at that age, at that time, to have a mentor like Bill Bach. And he passed away some few years ago. And I remember I went to the funeral. And what do you call it? Were they a wake or something? Yeah.
Yeah, that's before the
And
funeral.
there were pictures of the airplanes, and I knew them all. I mean, these folks don't. There weren't. I don't know how many. I may have been the only one who was a teenager at that time, and who went to the funeral. There were pictures of his big airplanes. He was. I was very lucky, very, very lucky.
You didn't mention anything about your paintings. Could you tell us something about how you got started and
When you retired and the courses you took, RISD at Rome?
Yeah, I took summer schools, Parsons in Paris 1 year, and RISD in Rome another. And it was just incredible. Here I am walking around Paris with my palette and doing watercolors. I don't know if I have it in here, I don't think so. No.
And silver mine?
Well, I knew the minute I retired, the first thing I was going to do was go to silver mine. And I took courses there. And as the years went on, they also had models that certain days of the week. I would go, not taking a course, but just to paint the model. I remember one woman who sat in a tub, you know, the metal tubs. And she sat in the tub and we all made paintings of her sitting in the tub. She would
What medium did you work in most?
watercolor. Yeah. Not that I haven't done, I've done oil sticks, because they're easy to use. No water, no turpentine, you know, no anything but the crayon. It's like a soft crayon in a way. Easy to handle, some of them in pencil form, some of them in a like a big crayon.
Did you ever have an exhibition?
I did, I'm trying to think where it was, downtown somewhere.
The Westport Art Store and a couple of banks, a bank in Greenwich.
Yeah, well, yeah, the Westport Art Store and Greenwich Bank, correct. But I may have been photography, Marion. I had exhibits of photography, blown, you know,
Poster size.
poster-size photography.
Well,
Can you talk about what's here?
you want to take,
Okay.
This sculpture, I had a 20-pound box of clay. I had it in my garage on the work table. I didn't know what to do with it. I just sat, looked at that box and looked at that box. And finally I opened it up. And what I did here is Moses protecting the children of Israel from the wrath of God after they made the golden calf. If you can picture that. That was my theme. And I did it sitting in a chair in the garage with this on the workbench. I did a clay, and then I had it fired at a foundry in Bridgeport, yeah. And I was told later that I shouldn't be surprised if I was in Florida at some art store that I would see this, because that foundry had a reputation of selling works of the work that they cast without telling the maker. I mean, that was, you know, so that was their reputation. So I really don't know if copies of this didn't end up in Florida somewhere in the...
so we could say that Moses didn't wear a yarmulke. The yarmulkes must have come later. And how about your watercolors?
As I said, the first thing I did when I retired was go to Silvermine. Silvermine was, I took courses there, and I used to go when they had offered models to anyone we paid a little fee or whatever it was.
What is Silvermine for those
Silvermine,
might not know?
Yeah, Silvermine is an art school
Located
in Norwalk.
Norwalk.
Yeah. A wonderful, inspirational place. I have dozens of watercolors that I've done up there. I just, every now and then I'll change, I'll put a different ones up.
who is your model? Anybody or?
They had models. One time, it's funny, our instructor would sit down right in front of the two models, or the model rather, and he would do a painting first to illustrate. He would get up and these two women will rush right down and sit right in front of the model. And Irwin would walk around, you know, over here, over there, till I got something I liked, which you can see the one in the rear. I mean, these two ladies just wanted to dominate the front section, right where the teacher, the instructor, made his original. And I said, no, this is not, there's more to it than that. There's more. And so I did the one of the lady with the umbrella from the back. I mean, they had, it seemed to me, they had no inspiration of their own. They had to sit right in front, exactly where the instructor made his painting. So that's why you see the woman with the umbrella, and Irwin went around the back.
Well, you've had a very interesting and long life. Certainly wish you many more years. Is there anything else you might want to add?
I would say that painting and when I was younger, model airplanes were my main enjoyment. And I designed some airplanes. We had a wonderful field up in up the line at what's the West? You know, I can't think of the.
Either can I, the beach up at Westport.
Yeah, there's a big field up there where we flew. We were lucky once
Campo
glided.
Beach? Campo Beach.
No.
Oh,
That's the only one.
got
the one I
away,
know.
and I'm watching it circling across Long Island, and I got a telephone call the next day. This fellow was duck hunting at Port Jefferson Harbor, 24 miles across the Sound, and he found my glider high up on the rushes. Should he cut the wing in half and mail it to me? I said, no! Tell me your name, your address, how to get to you. I'm coming out. I'm bringing my camera. And I drove out there, and there he was with my big red glider. I still have it. He found it when he was duck hunting.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And Marion, we're going to
Yes.
talk to you next.
Okay.
Okay. Today is October the 3rd, the year 2011, and we are at the beautiful home of Irwin and Marion Gans at 51 Caprice Drive in Stamford, Connecticut. And we're here on behalf of the Oral History program of the Jewish Historical Society of Lower Fairfield County. And we're going to interview Marion Gans. We already previously interviewed her husband, Irwin.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Marion.
Good afternoon, Hersh.
We'll go back to your early life. And I understand you were born and raised in,
Paterson, New Jersey.
how many years ago? Where were you born?
I was born at the Barnard Hospital in Paterson, New Jersey on March 16th, 1929.
Do you remember who your obstetrician was?
He wasn't an obstetrician, I wouldn't remember, but I do recall that it was a surgeon because my mother had a cesarean, that was me. And because it was such an event in those days to have a cesarean, she determined that she would not have any children after me. So I'm an only child.
I only asked because my wife came from Paterson and she had relatives who were physicians.
Oh,
One was a surgeon. I thought maybe you might remember. Well, anyway, what year was that?
1929, just before the crash.
And tell me about your early life in Paterson.
We lived in an apartment in Paterson. My mother's two brothers who were single lived with us. And so, although I had no brothers or sisters, I was raised with two uncles. Each of my parents was one of 9 children. And so I had lots of cousins and lots of aunts and uncles and wonderful family life. all of us didn't get together at the same time, but we were always with some groups within the family.
What was your maiden name?
Edelman, Edelman.
And tell us about your parents.
My mother was born in Paterson, New Jersey. Her father was in the wholesale produce business in Paterson, and his sons went into that business, followed him into it. My father was born in Newburgh, New York. His father was a baker, and when my dad was very young, they moved to Passaic, New Jersey, where he opened a bakery on what was first 2nd Street, and then it became a much higher class and it changed its name to Market Street. But Edelman's Bakery was a very well-known establishment in Passaic.
And your father, his business?
My father did not become a baker. 2 of his younger brothers did. He was in the men's clothing business in Passaic.
And on your mother's side?
My mother did not work after she was married. Before she was married, as a matter of fact, she worked for the telephone company that I assume was the Alexander Graham Bell Telephone Company in Paterson. And when she asked for time off for the Jewish holidays, they did not know that she was Jewish until that point, and she was fired. Her maiden name was Alexander, and she was not terribly Semitic looking. She had sort of blue hazel eyes and a very light complexion, and that was her first brush, I think, with anti-Semitism.
And there was no recourse in those days.
Absolutely none.
And how about her parents? Where did they come from, or where were they born?
My Alexander grandparents came from Latvia or Lithuania. Exactly where I'm not sure, except that I have been told since I was a little child that I am a descendant of the Vilna Gaon on my grandmother's side.
Did you know your grandparents?
Well, that'd be Lithuania.
Lithuanian, thank you. No, I did not know my mother's parents. I was named for each of them. Marion for my grandmother, whose name was Minna Mildred, and my Hebrew name is Menucha. And my grandfather was Louis Alexander, and my middle name is Lois, Menucha Leah.
And you grew up in the public schools?
Yes.
What was your experience there? Did you encounter anti-Semitism?
No.
What was life like?
I was in the college prep courses, and a very large percentage of Jewish kids in town were in those courses. There was an intellectual level there, even among the non-Jewish students, where we were friendly and we were supportive. I never experienced personally anti-Semitism. I would hear about anti-Semitic incidents that my mother and her brothers and sisters grew up with in the early 1900s, but never experienced it personally.
Was there a Jewish life for you as a child?
My Jewish background was totally informal. I never had a formal education. I believe that I went to Sunday school when I was around 8 or 9. I know that I was in the 2nd grade because I found some old report cards some years ago. And on the report card it said, "Marion is a very good student. It's a shame that she seldom attends." And the reason that I didn't attend was that the school was at the Jewish Center, which was the YMWHA in Paterson. And we couldn't walk there. I depended on my father to take me to Sunday school on Sunday morning. My dad, in the men's clothing business, worked 6 days a week, and Sunday was the day he played golf. So my Hebrew Jewish formal education was extremely limited. I really got my Jewish background from the cultural aspects of the home. Jewish humor, talking about Jewish issues, gastronomically, gefilte fish and potato latkes and everything else that went with it. My parents never hosted a Seder or a Hanukkah celebration during my entire childhood, growing up. We went to a relative's house for those events, and that was also very infrequent. But at the age of 7, I was shipped off to sleepaway camp. And the camp that my parents chose, not because of this, but they chose it because it had a very good reputation, was run by the YMYWHA Federation in New Jersey. They were the Felix Fold camps, and they were Shomer Shabbat. And the services there, geared for children, were just exquisite. And the Shabbos observance on Saturday was something beautiful. We sat Friday night after a wonderful dinner in the dining hall and sang for a good hour, and then went to services, and the entire camp was dressed in white. And that was my enriching Jewish experience, ages 7, 8, 9, and 10, each summer that I went to that camp.
What were your extracurricular activities as a child, or growing up in high school?
In elementary school, my mother was stage struck, I think, and wanted very much for me to be in theater. And practically, well, from the time I was a preschooler, I was given acrobatic, ballet, tap, and toe dancing lessons. And later on, I was given dramatic lessons to prepare me for a career in theater, which of course never really happened, except, again under her influence and with her taking the initiative, when I was in, I guess, the 7th or 8th grade, I was auditioned for a radio program called Nyla Mac's Let's Pretend. And I appeared on Nyla Mac's Let's Pretend in a couple of those broadcasts in minor parts, and from that was able to land a spot doing a commercial for Rinso. I don't know whether Rinso still exists as a washing detergent today, but I remember that my lines were, "I wash my dolly's clothes in Rinso just like my mommy washes my clothes." Because of that, because of appearing on doing that commercial, I had to get a Social Security number. So I had a Social Security number, I think, when I was 11 years old, right?
For those who don't know or remember, this was the age of Shirley Temple.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
So a lot of mothers wanted their daughters to emulate her.
Absolutely. I was told as a little child, you are reminding me, that Shirley Temple would have finished all of the green beans on the plate, Marion.
So after high school, you went on to college,
Went on to Syracuse.
and that's where you met
That's where I met Irwin.
Irwin. And you got married, what year?
We got married in 1950, August 27th of 1950. I was out of school a year at that point. I accelerated. I graduated in 3 years because I went 2 summers and took 2 full semesters, one each summer, so that I graduated actually in, I think my diploma says September 2 of 1949, and I was allowed, although I hadn't completed the summer school, I was allowed to go to graduation in June, so that my parents, I asked for permission to do this, so that my parents could come up and see me graduate, see me in cap and gown.
Right. So after your marriage, you moved?
We moved directly to Stamford. We lived in the Fairlawn Apartments on East Main Street that were one of the prime areas to live in if you were not in a private home, they had already won some award for their landscaping and their design. And we had 7.5 very, very happy years there, because almost all of Fairlawn was populated by young couples who were moving to Stamford. It was like there was an exodus from Brooklyn, the Bronx, New Jersey, and what have you, of young marrieds, professional people, coming to Stamford in the early 1950s.
And that's when you also developed some of the Jewish associations that you didn't have really in Patterson.
That's correct. I believe that I was one of the charter members of National Council of Jewish Women, and I became an officer in that organization. I was a vice president. Irwin and I were among the founding members of the Couples Club at Agudath Shalom. We joined the Couples Club, we joined Agudath Shalom, although neither of us came from Orthodox homes. Irwin's family was conservative, and mine was, they were really Jewish secular, although both my parents came from Orthodox homes, were raised Orthodox as children. We joined because it was a young congregation on the move with a very dynamic, inspirational, energetic, hell of a good guy, rabbi, Joe Ehrenkrantz.
This was not your only association with other clubs and fairs in Stamford. You were the president of the Center Women's Club?
Yes, I was active in the Center Women's Club for several years and became president. Florence Blum and I were the first women appointed to the board of directors of the Orthodox Congregation Agudath Shalom. I became the campaign chairman of the women's division of UJA. Before it was Federation, it was UJA in Stamford. In 1968, during the 68 war, 67 war, thank you. Right, it was the 67 war. In 68, I became president of the women's division. And I was also the president of the Connecticut women's division. There was a state organization of women's division that was, I think, existed really only for a few years during the time of the 67 war and into the next couple of years.
You were also on the board of directors, UJA?
I was on the board of directors of Federation.
Were you the editor of some Jewish paper?
I think the newspaper now is about 8 or 9 years old. The New Jewish Voice was revived after it had lain dormant for a number of years. And while I was still in business, while I was still heading Gans Public Relations, I was asked if I would be editor of the paper, and I did that just kind of as a sideline for 3 years. We revived the paper.
But before that, your training at Syracuse prepared you for what?
My training at Syracuse prepared me to be both a speech therapist and an English teacher. I had a double major. You were reminding me of something that I had forgotten for a long time. I wanted, because I had had this childhood experience of being a professional in radio, I wanted to go into radio. And in those days, we're talking about the late 1940s, television was just emerging. And I wanted very much to go into that. I was enrolled in the radio and television division of the School of Speech and Drama at Syracuse. And my mother wisely cautioned me that I really needed to have a more practical background. I found out about around that time also that she was saying, you know, you really need to have a teacher's certificate in case you can't break into the television field. At that time, Syracuse was such a pioneer in the field of television that they were guaranteeing their graduates placement, guaranteeing them placement, with one exception: if you were female. If you were female, they would guarantee you placement if you could do shorthand, so that you could become a secretary at a TV station. And that helped to persuade me that I'd better go into education. And my first job was as the first speech therapist in Clifton, New Jersey. So I gave myself the title of Director of Speech Therapy.
And then you taught here in Stanford?
Yes, when we married and moved to Stanford, I did a lot of substitute teaching, and I had a very checkered career in education because I have taught everything from nursery school through college. I never applied for a nursery school job, but they needed somebody with an education background, and I was asked to teach at the Jewish Center Nursery School. I wasn't trained to teach on the elementary level, but I was asked to teach the first, fourth grade at Bicultural Day School, which I did for a couple of years. At that time, our son Eddie was 2.5 years old, and I managed to find a sitter who was the wife of an exchange resident at Stanford Hospital. She, by her training, was a nursery school teacher, and she babysat for me while I taught at Bicultural. I was teaching only a half a day, the other half a day was Hebrew.
So you've had a very full life as teacher, mother,
Yes.
Jewish activist. Were you involved in politics too?
Irwin and I were involved in politics. Well, one of the organizations that I had joined early on was the League of Women Voters, and through that met a number of people who were politically active. And within our own neighborhood, we helped campaign for a guy who was then one of the best mayors, I think, that Stanford ever had, Walter Kennedy. We were very proud of him. He came and spoke, as a matter of fact, at a Friday night service at Agudath Shalom. The Couples Club helped to initiate Friday night services when we could all sit together instead of men and women being separate. And he was our guest speaker prior to an election time, and totally won over that audience because practically the first words out of his mouth after he said Good Shabbos was that when he was a young man, a young kid, he was a Shabbos goy on Pacific Street and Canal Street, where a lot of Jews lived in Stanford. From that moment on, we all loved him.
Were you also involved in a study group, Brandeis?
Yes, because of my interest in theater, I was asked to lead a study group for Brandeis women. It was called Theater of the Absurd and Not So Absurd, and I did that for a couple of years. The first year it was with a curriculum that was supplied by Brandeis, and we had such a good time with it that I was asked to continue a second year, and I had to make up my own curriculum, and that's when it became Not So Absurd.
So what are your leisure activities now? I guess you don't do teaching directly.
No. We both have traveled a lot. We love travel, reading, theater.
Where have you traveled to?
We've traveled to Europe several times. We've traveled together to Israel twice, and I have been to Israel 3 additional times on tours that were sponsored by Bicultural Day School when I was affiliated with the school.
When was the first time, if you remember, you went to Israel?
We went to Israel in 1968, after the 6-Day War. Have I got that date right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we were at the wall,
What was
and we were
67?
also at Masada.
And how about the last visit?
I think my last trip was around 2001.
It's quite a difference.
Very big difference, enormous difference in the development of that country. Awe-inspiring.
What stands out? Anything particular?
There are so many things that stand out. The excavations that were going on, the layers of civilization that were being discovered. When we were in the second time that Irwin and I went to Israel was when our older son had taken, as many students do, they take a year abroad. He took his year abroad in Jerusalem and went to the Hebrew University, and we visited Israel there and took a tour going down to Gaza. And the driver, just as a family did this, this was not part of an organized tour, the driver took us to farms that were then on the cutting edge of technology of what farms were doing, where they were hydrating plants that were growing vertically. We saw tomatoes growing vertically. Just fascinating.
Now that we're talking, you mentioned children, let's talk about your children.
Well, they're all brilliant, of course.
Of course.
And especially now that we have grandchildren and we're, you know,
All right, well, tell us, how many children do you have?
we have 3 children.
And tell us about each one.
We have Eddie, who spent 7 years.
How old is he now?
Eddie is 53. I can't believe it, but he'll be 54 in February. And he spent 7 years on the faculty of Linfield College in Oregon, in the thriving community of McMinnville, which is primarily known in Oregon as the center of their wine industry. He graduated from Hampshire College. Our daughter, Julie, is the mother of our only grandchildren, Jenna and Max. And for 10 years, she was in charge of a program that she initiated for the Norwalk Public Schools called From School to Career, counseling children on how to write resumes, how to conduct themselves in an interview, how to dress, and then on the other side of it, involving corporations and business organizations in hiring these children after school. So
Eddie lives where?
Eddie lives in a suburb of McMinnville in Dayton, Oregon.
So he lives out in...
Yes,
Oregon.
and Julie lives in Danbury, and our younger son, Robert, fell in love with Oregon and followed his older brother out there. He's living in a suburb of Eugene, and he is presently, although he's a gifted artist and a graphics designer, he presently is working on a cooperative farm in a suburb of Eugene, just a total career change.
So do you get to see them out there very often, or do they come here?
We go out about once a year, and the boys will be coming east in just a couple of weeks to visit us for a week.
Very nice. Besides your travel to Europe, how about traveling in the United States?
We've traveled in a more limited way in the United States. Irwin has much more experience traveling in the United States than I, because he traveled with his family in a motorhome, as he described, not only going west but all over the United States.
But he never bought a motorhome
No,
after you got married.
that's true.
How about, in general, living in Patterson? How has it changed for you in any special way from the time you first moved, aside from the fact that you changed the location of where you live?
I lived in only one location in Patterson until the day we were married. My parents moved out of Patterson to Passaic, which is where my father's business was, and lived there after he retired. I hardly saw Patterson after I was married because my parents were now in Passaic, and if occasionally we visited other relatives, it was just for a very brief visit. All of the family that I had in Patterson, all of the Alexander family, my mother's side, which were all born there, left Patterson. They're either in the suburbs, different areas in New Jersey, or they've retired to Florida, or they've moved west. Patterson is a totally different city from what it was when I grew up.
But Stamford has changed too, but I
Yes.
think in a different way.
Stamford has changed in a much more invigorating, positive way than Patterson has, although Stamford has a very diverse population, blacks, Hispanics, people from every country in Europe and Asia. Stamford also developed as a corporate presence, and during the early 1980s, when I had built my public relations business, it was the third largest presence of Fortune 500 companies in the country, after New York and Chicago.
How did you get into the public relations?
It seems that in any organization that I became involved with, I was doing publicity. This was after I had stopped teaching, or even while I was teaching. And I realized at some point that you could get paid for this. It could go beyond being a volunteer project. And I just started what was then called Marion Gans Communications at home, and realized that if I was going to get serious about this, I better learn what public relations was about. And I went back to school, and I took a graduate program at Fairfield University in corporate communications. After I had been involved in this and slowly building a business for about 5 years, our older son Ed came into business with me, which was supposed to be just a temporary thing until he found something else that he wanted. He really wanted to do theater management. And we changed the name of the company from Marion Gans Communications to Gans Public Relations. And as the business grew, and I must say that it grew a great deal because of Ed's presence. He had a natural gift for PR, for dealing with the press, for pitching stories, and brought in a lot of our corporate business. We then became incorporated. It was Gans Public Relations, Inc. And after about 5 years or so, he appropriately went for greener pastures in New York. And after a few years there, came back to Gans Public Relations, and I insisted that he come back as president and I would work for him. My main function, or my best function within that business, was writing. I'm very proud and immodest to say that during the first 6 or 7 years of the existence of Gans Public Relations, it earned 14 awards in professional competitions.
Does the entity exist?
No, I closed the business, I think in 1999, and when I thought I was all prepared for a very active retirement, I was persuaded to work 1 or 2 days a week for Bicultural Day School, doing their community relations, and that ended up as a full-time job for the next 6 years, and I enjoyed every minute of it. I just loved it.
So are you doing anything special right now, or you're really retired?
I'm really retired, except that I am now what I call myself ex-president, but my good friends and tactful people in Havra Eitz Chaim refer to me as President Emeritus. I served the last 2 years as president of the Havra, which Irwin and I joined about 5 years ago.
Do you think of anything else in your life that you'd like to talk about? Things that perhaps you forgot to mention, or that I didn't ask you about?
I really can't think of anything. I'd have to refer to notes.
Well, I think it's been a very enjoyable afternoon talking to both you and Irwin.
Picture.
I think we can show another photograph that Irwin took.
Oh, I would like to mention also, Irwin's artwork, in addition to other artwork that we have in the house, some of Irwin's artwork is in every room in this house, including 3 bathrooms. Whether it's oil stick, watercolor, or pen drawings, they're all there, as well as his photography. And I think that Irwin did not mention during his interview with you that he has won a shelf full of trophies in photography when he was in the Stanford Photography Club. And we're both very proud of that.
Well, we want to thank you
Show
for
a picture.
inviting us to your home, for the beautiful pictures that we've been able to see.
Mary, can you tell us about this picture?
This particular picture?
Uh-huh.
This Irwin took when we were on a vacation, traveling together through Italy, and Irwin has an eye for sights. He's very visual, and he saw the broom against the door with this fabulous stonework around it, and took the photograph, and of course it's complemented by just the one flower, or 2 flowers, one little plant there, and it was one of his prize-winning photos at the Stanford Photography Club.
Do you have any questions? Well, thank you again, Irwin
Thank you.
and Marion Gans.
This has been a pleasure. Oh, I'll take it.